Hello, everyone. Welcome. As some of you might know, that DeFi Toronto Meetup has been running since October of 2019, and this is our third year. And now we have over 2,000 members. So welcome everyone who can make it. And every quarter we have 3 meetings. 2 of them will be do online, which allow us to invite a speaker from outside Toronto, and also that make the cost of commuting to downtown, lower the cost of commuting. But once a quarter we have a in-person meetup in downtown Toronto. At the venue, the building called 111, where it's a co-working space. We have a fantastic a room that can host. So if you have not been there, you're welcome. And our next in-person meetup will be in June. So every 3 months, we are going to host an in-person meetup. Today we're going to do the online meetup. So we have 3 fantastic speaker from Karma, from Berachain, and from Hot Finance. So let's move on to next slide. Just here's our team. We have we start with 4 people. Now we grow to 6, and today we have Aline, Imran, and Johnson here, and Mark and Sophia couldn't make it today. Just a little bit about myself. I've been in the crypto space since 2014, and I used to work on Bay Street in investment, pension investment, and now I'm just full-time do investment, and also I do fundamental research for a crypto hedge fund called Foreign Capital. I also teach a course at York University on the blockchain use case in the industry. So that's a little bit about myself. Maybe I can pass on to Aline. Would you like to introduce a little bit yourself?
Sure, I'll keep it short and sweet. I work at Delve, formerly known as L1 Finance. We're focused on DeFi infrastructure and structured products. In one of the protocols that we had developed and contribute to is called Element Finance. We also work on open source governance system innovation. So the main one that we've delivered to the larger ecosystem is called Council. And if you'd like to learn more about any of those, feel free to DM me in the chat here. I'll pass it off to Imran.
Hey, thanks, William. So I'll keep it short as well. My name is Imran. I've been around the space since about 2017. I've worked with William a few times, and I do digital marketing and content lead marketing in the space. I'll pass it off to Johnson.
Thank you, Imran. Hi, everyone. My name's Johnson. I work in marketing as well. I work at a firm called Secure Digital Markets. It's a crypto OTC desk. I handle all of their social media stuff. And on the part-time, I am an independent blockchain and cryptocurrency educator, and excited to be here. Excited to see all of you. Welcome to the meetup. Over to you, Victor.
Okay, great. I just realized I didn't turn my camera, which I usually do turn on my camera, but now I'm sharing a screen. Let me see if there's any way I can turn my camera so I see anyone. Doesn't seem to give me the option to turn on my camera right now. So I will just continue then. Later on, I will turn my camera.
It's all right. Most people are pseudonymous in the crypto space.
Yes. We have fantastic speakers. So as usual, we start with a DeFi news recap. And today we have Johnson and Aline will cover the DeFi news recap. And then we move on to our first guest speaker, Mahesh, and then we go on to next second guest speaker. After the first two guest speaker, we have a short break. And during that time, anyone has any community announcement, whether you're hiring people, you start a new project, you're looking for, raising capital, anything you want to announce related to crypto, well, welcome you to use the time to make your announcement. And then after the break, we're going to have our third speaker from Pot Finance. Okay, now I'm going to pass on to Johnson and Aline to start with a news recap.
Thank you, Victor. Hi, everyone. Hasn't it been an eventful month? We had, for starters, the ETH withdrawals finally got enabled after almost 2 years. A lot of people have been staking with ETH, and right now, with ETH withdrawals being enabled, it is a major de-risking event. So before this event, if you had all the ETH enough to stake, you could do it yourself. But let's say if you were an institution and you were handling other people's money, you would pretty much not be able to do so because it wouldn't be very, very compliant. But now with withdrawals being enabled, this has been de-risked a lot. And I personally know this has been a blocker, which has now been removed. And I'm positive we can see a lot of institutions coming into the space. But looking at the data, looking at withdrawals, last time we had a poll, most people thought, I think it was about half and half, if you remember correctly, Victor, about people thinking withdrawals are bullish or bearish. Turns out withdrawals was bullish. The price did pump because a lot of people did want to keep accruing that yield. And all the withdrawals that we saw, I think there was news about a million ETH being withdrawn as of late. But it turns out that most of them are rewards. And the principal amount, which is basically the 32 ETH that is being withdrawn, is majorly from participants from centralized exchanges, namely Kraken, Coinbase, Binance, because they're required to do so. It is the SEC cracking down on them, saying hey, you can't stake here, so they have to withdraw the principal. But in terms of demand, what we are seeing is that most people who are withdrawing their ETH, taking it out of these centralized exchanges, they're moving into other places that they can stake their ETH. So yes, so I think overall very bullish. And just looking at all the indicators, let's go through them one by one. ETH price today, I think today it did go a bit down today and yesterday, but that is because of macro indicators, namely inflation in the UK, people expecting another increase in interest rates. But we clearly saw the Chapella upgrade was bullish. Price went up, but right now it's a little down. But overall, it is still up. And in terms of looking at locked ETH, we did see a slight decline, but this is because rewards were withdrawn. And it's only a matter of time before those rewards are being staked again. And then in terms of active validators, we saw a slight decline because... oh, is there a question? No, okay. Seems like it's just... But yeah, in case anybody have any questions, in the meantime, feel free to just pop in and just ask away. Is there a question?
Hey guys, anyone that's not speaking, do you mind just going on mute? I see a few people that are off mute. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, and looking at active validators, that went down a bit slightly because centralized exchanges had to withdraw the principal. Looking at staking yield, here's an interesting thing. It went slightly up. Now, the reason for that is the way staking is designed is that the lesser amount of ETH staked, the higher will be the staking yield. So it incentivizes more and more people to stake. And then the more people that stake, the staking yield goes down. So here the slight increase in staking yield is because of the slight decrease in the staking, in the number of validators and the number of ETH that's locked. But here's the interesting thing. Like, remember I told you the ETH went out from centralized exchanges and went to other services. These services are on-chain. So namely like Lido, Rocket Pool, sure, there's some centralizing elements in Lido. But still, I mean, these are pretty much on-chain solutions, and they have seen a huge increase in the amount of value locked in their projects. And substantially higher increase in Rocket Pool, which is about 10% compared to Lido's 3.3%. There's also another reason for that, because Rocket Pool recently had an upgrade called the Atlas upgrade, which lowers the staking requirements for ETH stakers. So instead of having 32 ETH, you could pretty much stake with 8 ETH and about 2.4 ETH worth of collateral. So very, very interesting developments. We are seeing the movement of people going away from centralized services to more on-chain services. I see there's a comment in the chat. Prerna, did you want to ask a question? Okay, all right. And in terms of like people selling ETH, I think this is the most positive indicator. There has been no material increase in the inflow to exchanges. So it's pretty much safe to say that people are withdrawing their ETH, but they're not looking to sell it. And next slide. And what we're also seeing after the Chappelle upgrade is that the staking yield become more and more stable, because the number of validators is more or less the same. So we can expect this to remain stable when it's more of a question of when more and more ETH will get staked. When that happens, we'll see an even further decline in the staking yield. So because we are getting more and more security in the system. And that's pretty much how the staking yield and the amount of ETH staked relationship works. So very, very interesting stuff. I think that's about it. Next slide, I think I'll hand it over to Arlene.
Thank you so much, Johnson. And I'm going to try to be quick because I know our next speaker is supposed to be starting in just a couple of minutes. But just a few big news events from like the last month or so. One of the big ones was Uniswap is now out of Apple jail. So Apple was kind of blocking its launch on the App Store, but after a while and a lot of, I guess, public plea, you know, the app is now launched in the App Store. So if you are an Apple user and you also use Uniswap, you can download it. It's open source. Check it out. Next slide. Okay, so Arbitrum has actually generated more fee revenue than Bitcoin. So there's been a ton of activity on Arbitrum and other layer twos like Optimism as well. I should say that, you know, it's not nearly as much fee revenue that's been generated on Ethereum. I think just in the tweet here, you can see that Ethereum is still generating about 28 times more fee revenue than Bitcoin in the same time period. Yeah, and together, I think just a couple of months ago, it was that Arbitrum and Optimism together actually also surpassed total transaction volume, you know, versus Ethereum layer 1 as well. So there's been a lot of interesting activity, and it'll be really interesting to see what happens in the coming months as they pick up more apps that deploy on L2s. Next slide. Okay, this is a pretty big one that's been happening over the last few days that's been reported. There's been like a systematic wallet draining operation that's been happening. Apparently, it's possible that, well, first of all, it's really targeting a lot of OGs in the space. I think up until yesterday, they had drained about $10 million from wallets that have been around for, let's say, more than 5 or 6 years. No one really understands exactly how this is happening, but it's possible that this person was able to obtain a cache of seed phrases, and they're parsing that out from that file and slowly and methodically draining several wallets. So there's a lot of best practices you can take on to ensure that you're practicing good crypto safety. One of them is definitely, consider moving crypto to a hardware wallet. Also potentially using a multi-sig. This might be for more advanced users, but you can deploy a multi-sig using a Gnosis Safe, which can be pretty straightforward. And that could protect you because you would need multiple, I guess, signatures on a single transaction to move that crypto. So that can be a little bit more safe as well. And just, generally just keep a pulse on what's happening around this event, and hopefully no one here has been impacted. There's a lot of security experts out there that, on Twitter and just that are blogging that can walk you through some other best practices to employ. Next slide. Okay, so I think it was just today, if I'm not mistaken, French bank, Société Générale, just launched a new stablecoin. It was maybe a half decent, or I should say a half-ass attempt at launching a stablecoin because it was highly inefficient the way that the code was written. I'm not sure if this was supposed to be considered like a prototype, but every single transaction was happening technically on Ethereum, on the L1, and even the way that the Solidity code is written, there's just generally a lot of inefficiencies. So you've had a lot of smart contract developers chiming in on crypto Twitter over the last day, just talking about this. It also goes to show you that, a lot of really strong crypto talent, we haven't seen a big movement or kind of a brain drain back into large institutions. A lot of the crypto talent in the space is definitely still, working with open decentralized projects within the DeFi space and other projects. It's probably going to be a couple years away before a lot of these large banks and large institutions are really able to attract top tier talent once we still have a major shortage for developers in the space. So, but best of luck to them. They need it. This one is really interesting. So Coinbase just recently got a Bermuda license to launch offshore. I was actually just in Bermuda last week for a conference, and I was speaking with members of the Bermuda Monetary Authority as well as their the fintech regulator there, which operates in partnership with the BMA. And Bermuda is definitely one of the more open places from a regulatory standpoint for crypto. They've got a very well-defined crypto regulatory framework, unlike the US. And, I think, what we've seen a lot of exchanges move out there. Bittrex is out there. We've seen Web2 apps that are also, onboarding fiat into, for crypto for clients as well, like Cash App, and Coinbase, of course, because Coinbase was working with the SEC and the CFTC. They've been at odds with each other in terms of how they define what is a security and what isn't. There's been a lot of regulatory mud. Nothing has been clear in the US. And so they were recently served a Wells notice. Bittrex, interestingly enough, was also served one just recently. And this comes after Coinbase made, dozens of attempts to work with the regulators in the US to ensure that they were playing on side. So it's a little bit of a surprise, but what might not be surprising is if Coinbase does eventually move fully away from the US jurisdiction and into jurisdictions like Bermuda. So keep an eye on Bermuda. I think that's going to be a really big topic for a lot of big projects, including DAOs. Right now, for DAOs, there's several different frameworks out there. If you want to create a legal wrapper around a DAO, there's the Cayman Foundation, of course. There's the Guernsey Trust. It's a purpose trust. And there's the, UNA kind of style corp as well. So I think there's going to be some cool innovation coming out of Bermuda that's going to be making a much more receptive place for DAOs and legal wrappers to operate from there as well. Okay, I think that is the last slide.
Yes, that's the
Okay.
last slide. Alim,
Perfect.
do you know if Coinbase, since Coinbase is a public trade company, do they have to delist if they move to
Yeah.
Bermuda?
That's a good question. I would think so, but I'm not 100% sure on that. If there's any lawyers in the audience, maybe they can they can chime in the chat.
Okay, that's all our news recap. I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and then we go on to our first speaker, which Alim will introduce our first speaker. So
I can introduce. I think it's Mahesh is our first speaker,
yeah.
correct?
Okay, so Mahesh, you have a slide to share, correct?
I do.
Okay, so
Awesome.
I have to pass my my role to you. Let me see, how can I make you a host? Okay, now.
In the meantime, I'll do the introduction. How about that?
Sounds good.
Awesome. So Mahesh is the founder of Karma, a DAO contributor onboarding and analytics system. He's a developer by profession and is passionate about DAOs, reputation systems, data, and analytics. His talk this evening will cover the need for contributor reputation in DAO governance. He will discuss the evolution of governance in DAOs, how contributors govern the DAO, and why contributor reputation is key to the success of DAOs. Welcome, Mahesh.
Thank you, guys. Excited to be here. So let me share my screen.
Looks good.
Okay, sweet. I'm going to be, as Imran said, I'm going to be talking about contributor reputation in DAO governance. I could probably skip this because I already got the intro. I'll talk quickly a little bit about Karma and what we do. Karma is a contributor. We build DAO tools to track and manage contributions of the members of the DAO. So primarily we help DAOs onboard their contributors, specifically delegates in who are active in the governance. And the core idea behind Karma is to improve DAO governance. You should provide visibility into what is happening in the DAO, what the contributors are doing, which is essentially what we do by indexing all their on-chain and off-chain contributions and surfacing all of that information in dashboards. So in this talk, I'll be talking a lot about little bit about what is governance, why do you need governance, and also why do you need a reputation in governance. Just to set some context, at Karma, so far we have looked at around 50 DAOs. We have worked with 10 or 20 DAOs, integrated around 50 DAOs. We index a lot of data. We have close to 1 million delegates and token holder activity indexed. We look at a lot of the on-chain voting and on-chain and off-chain voting activity. So we have a million votes stored in our data warehouse. We do a lot of analysis on it. So all these learnings and all the product which we are building is all based on our understanding of these DAOs and how they operate. So everyone here knows, everyone works for different organizations. You guys all know employees are the most valuable asset in an organization. So in a DAO, it's not any different. Employees, there are no employees as such outside of core team maybe, but contributors are the most valuable asset in a DAO, except in a DAO, it is a little different from a regular corporation because a lot of the contributors are pseudonymous. All you see is their PFP. You never see their picture or their face on video calls or anywhere. And most of them are simply like contributing through writing on the forum or voting or garnering voting power on chain. So a lot of them are pseudonymous, and DAOs are a very fluid system where there are part-timers, there are people who work for like a season or a few months and then they move on. There are full-time contributors. It's all over the place, right? So that brings with it some challenges. Now, if you are a stakeholder in DAO, let's say you have a bunch of tokens, or you are the core team of the in the DAO. When a contributor comes to your DAO, wants to contribute, how do you trust them? How do you know what have they accomplished? Like the culture in the crypto system and the in the DAO ecosystem is like, you don't really like ask for someone's resume, or you don't even like say like, hey, can you show me your LinkedIn, or like, can I do reference checks? Like none of those really happen. So how do you trust them? How do you know what they have accomplished? What's their experience? And then for contributors themselves, like how do they go sell themselves to the DAO? Like, hey, I can do these things. This is what I'm good at. So those are some of the challenges in the DAO. And then specifically at Karma, we tackle a much smaller niche in the governance space. In every DAO has some sort of governance. Some of them have like pretty active governance system. Some of them are like still upcoming, really small, like there's only a small core team, but they're slowly kind of like decentralizing and bringing in more contributors to govern the DAO. But what defines a DAO with a healthy governance system? Every DAO aims to be like a fully decentralized and have like healthy governance. What does that mean? So that means they need a large pool of contributors who are bringing in diverse perspectives, and they're actively participating in governance, and they are engaging in good faith, and they are good citizens of the DAO. So that's what makes a good governance in a DAO. Now, when the DAO started taking off, the first version of the DAOs, they said, we will just give, here is all the contributors, here is all the token holders in the DAO, let them govern the DAO from the bottoms up. So that's how the first version of the DAOs launched. Over a period of time, people realize that doesn't really work, because if in your DAO, if we have like 1 million token holders, not all the 1 million token holders are going to keep up to date on what's happening in the DAO and then vote on proposals. Like they just don't have the time, or like a lot of them don't even care about it. So the first version of the DAO's governance didn't really like work well. So they moved to the next iteration. The next evolution was delegation, where they said like, okay, you are a stakeholder in the DAO, you are a token holder, but you don't have to participate in governance. Instead, you just delegate your voting power to another someone else, a representative. And that whole concept is called delegation in DAOs. So what do these delegates do? So they receive voting power from the token holders, and then they vote on behalf of them. The token holders trust them that I'm giving my voting power to you, and you will make the right decision for the DAO and help the DAO grow. In turn, the token value goes up. Like everyone have their own motives. And then the other benefit is token holder at any point can say, well, I don't like this delegate. I can simply go and give my voting power to someone else. So that in a nutshell, what delegation in DAO governance is. Now, the question is like, how is this delegation working? Also, I'm talking about all these things to drive a larger point of like why we need a reputation system, but I will tie all these things into one in the next few slides. But really, how is this delegation working? So at Karma, we do a lot of stats and analysis of these different DAOs because a lot of this data is on chain and we index a lot of their off-chain data. So you can see we pulled some of the larger delegates DAOs in the ecosystem, and it's better than individual token holder voting, but they're still not that great. There are some DAOs where like more than half of them have said like, oh, I want to be a delegate. I want to represent you as a token holder, but they don't even show up. They don't even come and vote on they don't vote on proposals. They are not at all involved in governance. And then some of them are involved, but like you can see there's like a pretty large percent of them are like very, very like, they're barely active. There's very, very few who are like highly active contributors. So, and we did, delegation is a very hot topic in DAOs who have this system. And we did another analysis recently, and we looked at some of the top delegates and said, okay, so these people are receiving delegations, people are giving their voting power to them, but how are they doing? Surprisingly, we call them ghost delegates who are like who are receiving voting power, but they don't even come and vote. So you can see for some DAOs, like 80% of them haven't voted at all in Q3, Q4 of last year. So some of them are like pretty good, like 70%, but like some of them are like very, very average. And then we also looked at how is the voting power like distributed. So there are some DAOs who are like doing pretty good, like pretty much everyone who got some tokens delegated were active. Their voting power was used. Some of them not much. So it's been like more like a lot of DAOs are on the lower end of participation. So we looked at that. And then another interesting thing we looked at was how are these delegates voting? Are they just following the herd mentality and saying, this is a safe way to vote from a proposal, I'm just going to vote, I don't want to ruffle any feathers? Or are they being contrarian, voting against the majority? So you can see the spread of how they're here. As the voting weight, you can see like majority of the people are sitting here who are like, who don't want to take risk, they just vote however the majority votes. There are very few people here who are like kind of like in this range, and especially as your vote weight increases, like this is where like you carry a lot of voting power, you tend to not ruffle your feathers too much. So these are all like the things we look at. The question is like, why is this interesting to us? Like, why do we care about these things? So these are all like some of the problems I talked about. Like, not enough people are like really showing what they, not really voting the way they want to because they don't want to ruffle any feathers. People are not even, like a lot of people are not even voting. So these are all like the problems we should fix if we want to get a better governance system in the DAOs. So our solution is, well, can we actually show everyone like what is happening in the DAO? Like, how are these contributors doing? What are they doing? And essentially what that means is like, can we build a reputation system which holds these contributors or the delegates accountable, helps them. Can we build a system where they can show off like how they have contributed to the DAO? That will help token holders choose better delegates. If a token holder is not doing great, like that will help them redelegate their tokens. And DAOs are such a fluid system where there is a delegate or a contributor who's there for like 6 months and moves on to another DAO. Someone is working like only a couple hours. Someone is like working like an hour a week. Like, how do you compensate them? without having enough information about them. So if you have a system or a reputation system which tells how these people have contributed to the DAO, it will not only help solve some of these problems, it will also help these contributors actually take their reputation with them across DAOs, and they can carry it with them. And the beauty of these systems are a lot of their activity, like all the things which we look at, a lot of this information is already on chain. So we are like, all we're doing is like simply indexing it and helping them surface all this information. So this is really like your reputation system is like your on-chain resume for the contributors. And it's like a public, like a board where everyone can see what is happening. That is essentially like what we at Karma are building. And the reason I wanted to show all these stats is to show like what these problems are and how a reputation system can solve these problems. At a very, very high level, like at Karma, what we do is we work with each DAO and we say, okay, where are all the contributors like active? So they are actively voting on proposals on chain, on different systems. They're discussing, giving feedback to others on forums. In fact, we index like developers. This is one interesting use case which we have been exploring is voting power based on reputation. So a lot of the V1 of DAOs, you had to own tokens to be a participant in governance. In the V2 of DAOs, you need to be good at marketing yourself to get voting power. But what if you are like you neither have the money, you don't have good marketing skills, but you still are a good contributor? What if you're like a rock star developer contributing to the DAO? So we now index like GitHub contributions. So if a DAO wants to give some voting power to a developer based on their code commits, like they can absolutely do it. So they can use that reputation towards like voting power or like compensate them. So there are a lot of interesting things you can do once you start indexing this and when you like start putting these things on chain.
Mahesh, yeah, can you try to finish in 5 minutes, because our second speaker has a hard stop at 8:15. So just want to give us enough time for the second speaker. So just speed up a little bit.
Absolutely. This is the last slide I have.
Okay, great.
So I also wanted to just show like this is how our dashboards look, which shows insights into like who the contributors are. In this case, these are all the delegates. It shows like how many tokens have been delegated to them, what's their voting weight. There's all these things which we index here is all surfaced in these dashboards. So that is at the heart of like what we do at Karma. Mm-hmm. So that's all everything I had, and I'm happy to take any questions.
One quick question may not relate to what your project is, but is related to governance. Have you seen any governance? Have you seen any DAO that give some reward to the people who vote? Like I was just thinking about in the traditional finance. I used to work on Bay Street, and the pension fund I work for, that they actually the board of director when they show up to attend the meeting, they receive about $10,000 per meeting for showing up. So it's basically to incentivize people who receive the delegation, represent the shareholder to. Have you seen any DAO that actually give out token for if you are delegate, you know?
Yeah, so I have seen some DAOs give out these POAPs. Those are like NFTs for participating in like voting. I have seen some of them do that. And there's one DAO which we ran an experiment last few months ago. What they wanted to do was they used our data and they would compensate the top 5 contributors. Not only based on voting, but based on their activity on forum. Like Did they create proposals and take their proposal to a vote? Did they give feedback on proposals? So any delegate who was like active across different, they contributed in different ways. We aggregated all of them and kind of built a leaderboard, and they would compensate like the top 5 contributors every month. So we have run some experiments like those with DAOs.
Great, thank you, Mahesh.
I just have one quick question for Mahesh, hopefully just 20 seconds here. So Mahesh, just in terms of like the kind of like technical implementation of actually bringing reputation on chain, can you talk about any initiatives that are currently in flight that could help to do that?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So far in the first version of the product, what we have done is we index all this data and we're like storing it in our centralized system. But the next version in the next few months is to actually like put this all on chain and turn this into a like almost like a Lego block. So just like in DeFi where you have these Lego blocks, you can build other applications on top of it. Similar to that, we want to put all these stats and everything on chain. We are actually working with, so we are also part of the council, which Alim's team started. Through that, we're going to write a lot of the stats to the new chain where people can tap that data and then build interesting applications on it. So, so we are actively working on like putting all these things on chain, the aggregated data.
Great, thank you, Mahesh. Really very interesting. I think those your tool is really going to be very useful, and I hope that more DAO will use your platform for tracking the contribution. It is a very practical issue that every DAO facing.
Yeah, I hope so too. And yeah, thank you for the opportunity again.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Mahesh. Appreciate it.
Okay, now I'm going to move on to second speaker. Alim, you're going to introduce second speaker?
Yes, please. And I guess while I'm doing that, Victor, if you could just transfer, or actually, I think it's Mahesh, if you can transfer host.
I reclaimed, I already
You reclaimed it. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, if
so
you could
now
transfer that to.
Yeah, I transfer to DevBear now.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, so I guess we're really excited to have Deyeon. He's the CTO, technical lead for Berachain. This is gonna be really short and sweet because this is all he got. He's gonna be providing an overview of the new Polaris EVM framework and a rundown on the new Berachain L1. And I'd also like to congratulate the Berachain team on successfully raising their Series A. I think they raised $42 million at a $400+ million valuation. So that's pretty huge and a pretty impressive feat to do in somewhat of a bear market that we're in right now. So congratulations to you guys. I'll pass it back to you, Deyeon. Is Deyeon on mute?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yeah. Oh, super weird. I was talking the whole time. No, I was just saying, appreciate the shout out. I was saying we've been working really, really hard on both the business side as well as the technical side to make everything happen. And it's been a long road, but we're getting really excited to get closer and closer to launching stuff. We released the open source the Polaris repo about a month and a half ago now, and are going to be putting up some more stuff shortly on actually Berachain as a whole as well. But yeah, so today I'm going to kind of give you guys an overview on both. I hope you can see my screen here. Both an overview on kind of Berachain as well as Berachain's Polaris framework, which is effectively a modular plugin based EVM framework. So the idea behind it is we wanted a way to be able to utilize, in our case, both the best of kind of the Cosmos ecosystem while still having a EVM equivalent virtual machine. Kind of one of the issues we've seen on a lot of these L1s is this kind of concept of EVM compliance or compatibility, which was most recently the ZK sync issue that kind of went viral on Twitter, really highlighted. So that was a large part of the motivation for Polaris, was being able to have both the best of app chains and the EVM. So a little bit about myself. I'm CTO and co-founder here at Berachain. Previously, I was a distributed systems engineer at Apple. Spent the early part of my career down in the Bay Area. I was one of the Canadians that got suckered down there for a while, but I'm back now. My formal computer science education is from the University of Waterloo. I have a software engineering degree from there, and been kind of in and out of crypto since around 2015. I kind of dove when I was in high school. I played a lot of Minecraft, super random. But I ended up actually, back when Bitcoin was really early, I wrote a bunch of plugins that allowed for users on these servers to like use the in-game economy and transact in BTC. Had a lot of BTC, don't know where it is now, but a good learning experience nonetheless. So a little bit about the team as well. None of this would be able to be a thing without any of them, so I have to shout them out. The team comes from a super wide variety of backgrounds, from enterprise software development, some crypto firms, startup founders, etc. Papa, Bear, and Smokey, my other two co-founders, were previously former startup founders and went through Y Combinator, and have been a huge part of getting Berachain to where it is today. So a little bit about Berachain before we dive into Polaris itself. So what Berachain is a fully EVM compatible L1 powered by Polaris. We're using the Cosmos SDK as kind of our base frame, as our app chain framework we're building on top of, but it's not a proof of stake chain. It's what we call proof of liquidity. And the idea behind proof of liquidity is we wanted to solve this systemic problem that we noticed when we were trading throughout kind of DeFi 2.0 and kind of the Alto 1 rotation, where we saw a lot of these ecosystems where it would be a bunch of people would bridge mercenary capital over from Ethereum, kind of play these pump and dump Ponzi games, and then kind of leave. And all the projects on the building on the chain, when all these projects leave and the liquidity left, would be left high and dry. And this kind of created a cyclic kind of problem where nobody wanted to really try to innovate on things that were outside of mainnet or even the L2s to some extent, because of the fact that everyone knew that they were just kind of this gambling casino type thing, and there was no incentive for somebody to go and invest a ton of time and energy and resources into building something novel when they knew that these ecosystems last for 3 to 6 months and then die. And a big part of this was that we saw was liquidity. And having liquidity as a core primitive in these networks was something that we thought would be really interesting, and that's effectively what proof of liquidity is. So what proof of liquidity does is it takes all of these ambient assets that traditionally would be securing a network versus proof of stake, and we use them to create liquidity pools and create liquid markets for tokens, and really tie that into the chain's base layer, its validator set, and how blocks are built. The phrase we use this is for proof of liquidity is designed to systemically build liquidity. Additionally, as part of the system, we aim to solve stake centralization as well. In Cosmos especially, we see a lot of chains where there's really only 3 or 4 validators that are making up 30, 40, 50% of the voting weight. And even on Ethereum mainnet these days, where 50-something% of the blocks are produced by Coinbase and Lido. And this is something that's really interesting to us and a big problem that we wanted to solve. And a large part of the problem that we saw is that if you're a retail user or even institutional user, there's no real incentive for you to ever delegate your tokens to a validator that's not one of the top 5%. In the traditional proof of stake platform, you're getting your APR. It's very standard. No matter what validator you delegate to, it doesn't really matter. And part of the idea behind proof of liquidity is we've created a reason for people not to just do that, as we'll kind of explain in a bit. And the last thing is that we wanted a way to incentivize protocols and applications building on the chain to actually run the infrastructure of the chain. And we've done that through creating a way for the validators themselves, whenever they produce a block, they're able to effectively direct liquidity flows through a native DEX that's built into the chain. And that is what's creating both that rationale for stake centralization fixing, and then also this incentivization of protocols. So at a high level, the user will delegate the staking token of our network to a particular validator, and this validator has some more responsibilities than just producing blocks. One of the things that this validator does is it will choose where the block reward that it's producing will go. So in the traditional proof of stake system, the block reward would go directly to the validator itself. But in this system, the block reward is spread across various liquidity pools. And the idea behind this is the validator, can incentivize different pools that it finds interesting, maybe to its use case or its goal or something like that. And you can see kind of for a protocol, this could be really interesting, right? If I'm a protocol building on the chain, maybe I do want to run a validator because I can go and incentivize a liquidity pool with my token in it and basically get emissions directed to this as part of the system. Additionally, we have a bribing module. So basically what that allows you to do is it allows validators to not only direct emissions to certain pools, but it allows validators to pay out its delegates as well. So, you can incentivize users to delegate to your validator in a different way. And this gets it creates an interesting game theory element where there's all these different levers and stuff that validators play. And it really helps solve the validator community engagement problem where, if you're a validator that's not running a protocol, you should really know what's going on in the ecosystem and really be in tune with some of the larger protocols, because if you're not, you may struggle to get delegates, and it creates an interesting kind of ecosystem community game theory aspect there. But why EVM? So the biggest thing, especially in Cosmos, is that Cosmos natively doesn't have an EVM. And Cosmos is a super cool ecosystem and has a lot of interesting features. But one of the reasons why we've felt at Berachain that it hasn't been able to excel to the ranks of like OP Stack and Arbitrum and to the hype that it once has was because there was no native EVM framework. And EVM is the catchphrase they say is like they're almost like a mature ecosystem at this point. You see big, huge companies still devoting tons of resources to building EVM tooling. Paradigm's Foundry, and they're putting tons of resources into that. Chainlink's primary use case is EVM chains, Hardhat, Soulmate, all these different standards and tooling and frameworks and stuff that are being built, and it's creating a very friendly development environment for people who are new to blockchain and even experienced in blockchain. You see all of this on the roll-up side as well. Everything is Ethereum based, everything is EVM based, and it's kind of reached this like JavaScript status where even though it has some drawbacks, it's kind of is the standard to some extent now. And we see that when we look at the TVL numbers on EVM versus non-EVM chains. You're looking at almost a 20x or almost a 30x difference in TVL between EVM chains and non-EVM chains. And a lot of that just has to do with the accessibility to build on these chains, how easy it is, the tooling, and just kind of where people's eyes are. And to this day, it kind of is still in EVM land. So kind of going back to Polaris, why did we build this? And the idea kind of to reflect back on what I said at the beginning is we wanted to be able to utilize both the power of application-specific blockchains, which are super powerful and have all these really interesting and cool primitives that can be built as part of them, with this general purpose smart contract platform that people know and love and builders know how to use. And we really wanted to find a way to allow them to coexist that allows them to be greater than the sum of their parts and not really have to make as many trade-offs as previous systems or embodiments of EVM on app chains have. So what is Polaris actually? So we say it's a modular plugin-based EVM execution framework designed with app chains in mind. And the idea behind this is that we wanted to find an easy way for any app chain framework to integrate an EVM. One of the things that we saw when we were kind of playing with existing solutions in Cosmos, the most well-known is Ethermint, which I imagine there's some people from ChainSafe in the audience. I know you guys were a maintainer of that at some point. Is it was very, very coupled. There was a lot of where did Cosmos end? Where did the EVM begin? And it was really not clear how to make it all kind of work together. And it was very kind of muddy water. And the issue with this is that Go Ethereum and the Geth code base has a lot of nuance on how things work. Things around like what constitutes a block header, when do we take the hash, the things that are consensus enforced in the header versus not, the order of operations we're doing things. And that nuance, when you're trying to take all that nuance that's not necessarily well documented in Geth and apply that into an application specific blockchain and create an EVM into it, you need to make sure that that stuff is correct, because as soon as you start losing that nuance, you start getting out of the realm of EVM equivalence and start getting really into EVM compatibility. And when you're talking about EVM compatibility, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have an EVM. It means that you have something that looks very much like an EVM, feels like an EVM to the average user, but those little subtle nuances are all the difference. The devil is completely in the details, and these type of things can be the difference between, an OP stack chain being able to deploy, Chainlink working, things like this. And it's extremely important that we were able to have those things. So the goal of Polaris is to abstract all of that nuance away, allow the framework and the library to handle it, and then the application chain, it doesn't need to worry about it at all. the idea, and taken very much from our Cosmos background, is if we have a way to have a pluggable consensus algorithm, if we have a way to have a pluggable EVM, we have an app chain framework in the middle that can act as the glue, and everyone's happy, everything works, and nobody kind of loses. And the idea is that, you know, the consensus engine doesn't know it's running an EVM, the EVM doesn't know what consensus engine it's running on, and everything is abstracted away to the developer. So in our case, our Cosmos SDK implementation, what we've done is we've effectively extended the traditional Cosmos way of looking at things. And what it does is, you know, Cosmos is its whole proposition was, how do we decouple the networking layer from the consensus layer from the application layer? And we see this, right? You know, networking uses a P2P layer. You know, the consensus algorithm, which is formerly known as Tendermint, is that BFT algorithm. And then Cosmos SDK allows for these application-specific blockchains to be built. What we did with Polaris is we said, okay, well, what if we just add a fourth stack on top of that, which is a VM? And the idea is that we're able to have the EVM completely discoupled from this Cosmos SDK host chain. And that allows for a really clear, defined edge to where does the application chain end and where does the EVM begin, and how do we keep them as separate as possible while still having a common language that they can speak. And we can look at kind of some of when we were out to build Berachain, we looked at some other alternatives and ultimately found that not everything that we wanted to have was on every existing solution. So originally, the original story of Berachain was it was actually going to be an optimism fork, funny enough. But we saw we didn't want to lock into that platform. A lot of the core DeFi logic that's built into Berachain and this whole validator game theory really relied on the concept of stateful precompiles and cross-chain compatibility. And really, the existing solutions never really satisfied that in the way that we had hoped. So we ended up building our own thing, and being able to do that and have the compatibility while still being able to iterate and add new features was something that was really important to us. So from an architecture perspective, Polaris kind of works like a rollup. We really conceptually, we really borrowed that architecture of having effectively, you could think about it as the L1 or the L2. The way we describe it is we have a host chain, which in our case is Cosmos, and then we have a Polaris chain or an EVM chain, which is on the bottom side there. And what we do is you can think of the EVM chain as almost a subset of the host chain's block. So the host chain is able to accept all of these transactions. It passes these Ethereum transactions down to the ETH chain, and then the ETH chain is responsible for posting effectively its state back to the host chain. And if, for those who are familiar with the concept of rollups, we have all the call data for our transactions. We have the state root. Effectively, we are kind of allowing the security to work in that regard. Obviously, it's a bit of a stretch to claim that it works like that, but conceptually, you can kind of see the similarities. And how this works is the host chain itself is responsible for things like P2P, consensus, accepting transactions, general kind of, it is the real blockchain. And then what we do is we have a series of plugins that allow for this host chain to communicate with an EVM chain that's running inside of it. And then the EVM chain looks very similarly from an architecture perspective to how Geth does. We have a blockchain object, we have a state processor, we have an RPC endpoint, et cetera, and the only way that the Cosmos knows that this EVM chain even exists is through this communication layer. So we can really see kind of the bifurcation of the two runtime environments. And at the same time, we allow for a small, basically, bridge or communication layer to allow them to kind of sync their data and compare things that way. And that allows the two environments to work together, but also independently. And that's really important because by allowing them to work as two separate units that are effectively syncing back and forth to each other, you don't lose native compatibility for each. So we don't lose anything on the Cosmos side. Kepler wallet still works. All of these application-specific blockchain features still work. And on the EVM side, MetaMask works, Ledger works. All the app hashes are correct. The way that blocks are built are correct. The way that block hashes are constructed are correct. To ensure perfect compatibility on the EVM side and the ability to claim EVM equivalents. The last thing that was really important to us was precompiles. And when we set out to build Berachain, we wanted to have all of this core DeFi logic built into the chain. So things like the validator set management that we talked about before. We also have a variety of DeFi products that will be built as core primitives built into the chain to facilitate this proof of liquidity system. And what it needs is it needs precompiled contracts. And the way that that's done today is it's done without any kind of framework, or it's all done manually. So you have to parse this byte array, you have to really do some nitty-gritty stuff. And in the way that non-EVM chains don't have any tooling, building precompiles doesn't really have any tooling. And these existing ways to do so are really clunky and overall hard to use. And with us at Berachain having so much critical core infrastructure going to be utilizing precompiles, we wanted to spend some time and really invest in how do we make these easy to develop so that a new engineer coming on board, or that a project that's also going to be using Polaris, doesn't have to think about the semantics of like, oh, I have to parse this byte array, I have to do all these weird things. They just write a precompile very much like they would write a smart contract. And it's a familiar, friendly, tooled environment that's easy to use. So what we did is we tried to mimic writing smart contracts as much as possible. So writing a precompile with Polaris using our PDK, which is short for a precompiled development kit, looks a lot like developing regular smart contracts, which is super awesome. So the developer is responsible for doing two things. They have to define their Solidity interface over on the left here. This example here is for the staking precompile, which talks to the staking module in Cosmos. So you define your Solidity interface, and then on the right, you define in Go, you define a struct that looks very much so like a regular function, right? It's nothing funky. You define a series of functions that map to the signatures you see on the left, and then that's as simple as that to write a precompile. And it's very much feels like you're writing smart contracts, which is really, really important to us because it really abstracts all of the complicatedness of these precompiles away and makes it a really friendly development environment. So what we do is the developer has to write these two files, and then we actually built sort of like a compilation. It's almost like a baby compiler that actually merges these files together, compiles them down, and builds almost like a kind of, we stole the terminology from Docker, but a precompiled container, which effectively allows for this precompile to be compiled down, and then you could just pass it in and register it however you'd like. So the host chain will just take this container and it can run it however it wants. And it just shows up to the Solidity developers as this interface here. And they just interact with it as if it was a regular smart contract, which is super, super powerful for DeFi, because it means that protocols building on the chain can integrate their protocols tokenomics and the way their data flows and things right into these base level primitives of the chain. So things like in the case of the staking, right? There's an easy way to stake tokens. Some of our other kind of the validator bribes and stuff that we have, people can build smart contracts that plug into this stuff. And it's super exciting from that regard. So here's a quick little example of what we did in Cosmos is we built a liquid staking dApp. It's a really simple one, super naive. So all it is it's an ERC20 contract where you can like deposit the native token in. Under the hood, it calls it basically calls the native Cosmos, staking.delegate here is going to call the native Cosmos staking module, and then it will mint you an LSD for it. So if anyone here is technical in the audience, you can go clone our repo and try this out. It's super cool to play around with. So on the left here, we're just starting up an example of the Cosmos Polaris chain. We can use the Cosmos stuff. We can query the validators and see, hey, we have some amount of shares delegated to this validator. This is the local network, so there's only one. And then we can go ahead, use Foundry, and we can deploy our liquid staking contract. There's our contract there, which is super awesome. And then from there, we can go and actually delegate our native token to this contract, and it will mint us the ERC20 shares, which is super cool. I think I changed the value here, so it's a little easier to see. But once we send this transaction off, we'll see that we have a bunch of information here. And we also have something that's really cool as well, is our precompiles will actually emit all of the logging information from within Cosmos. It converts these Cosmos SDK events into Ethereum logs, which is super great for just general visibility into these modules and making them feel a lot more like real smart contracts, and as opposed to these kind of hacked in things. Having that visibility is really great for off-chain tools and data scientists and things like that. So the logs actually get emitted by the precompile, which is super awesome. Then I think, if I remember correctly, the demo goes and queries the validator in Cosmos, and you'll see that the tokens are allocated to there, which is super cool. So kind of moving on, we have some other teams that are building with us on Polaris as well. So the guys over at Skip, we've been working with really, really close. Skip is this, they're basically building, it's kind of like Flashbots in the Cosmos ecosystem. You can kind of think of the parallel there. And we're actually building some really cool stuff into Polaris that allows for like native proposer builder separation, native kind of bundle auctions, auction bids, things like that built right into the chain itself, which is super cool. So you'll be able to have full kind of Flashbots Protect and Mev Boost built right into the chain with no requirements for additional off-chain relayers, additional RPCs that need to be required. So if you want to leverage these features, users won't have to use like the Flashbots RPC. It's just they can use any RPC and it exists there. What's really cool about the precompiles is we're working with Scott and the guys over at Argus about they have a VM that they're making that's not an EVM, and they're going to use precompiles in order for users to write EVM smart contracts and then communicate with things in their VM, which is super exciting. And then the guys over at Catalyst were working on some of the Cosmos native features, so like full IBC compatibility, having interchain accounts, so like cross-chain smart contracts built directly into utilizing IBC in the Cosmos ecosystem, and then some interchain security stuff as well. So how can we use smart contracts and stuff to define properties about the security of other chains, which is super cool. Some other things that we're working on and kind of toying with is we've also been working with the guys over at Celestia, Rollkit. So we have Polaris is fully enabled with Rollkit. So if you ever want to launch a Polaris chain and have it use Celestia for its data availability, that's fully able to do. And eventually we've been playing with this idea of, okay, well, what if we could use this to, have Polaris chains that settle on Bitcoin or Ethereum or anything like that. Polaris would be fully compatible with Celestia's Bitcoin DA stuff that they've been working on. And then also other host chain implementations. So right now we're building, specifically in Cosmos, but the idea for Polaris is that it's not only for Cosmos, but it's for any application chain framework. So if anyone in the audience is building using Hyper SDK or anything else, definitely shoot me a message. I'd love to see how we could get Polaris on there as well. But yeah, thank you guys for coming. Appreciate y'all being here. Here's my socials. If you ever want to talk tech or DeFi or anything, definitely hit me up. Always love to do so. And yeah, thank you guys for having me.
Thank you, Dave here. Very interesting. Is it fair to say that Berachain can serve any blockchain that is EVM compatible? Is that right?
So basically the idea is that like Berachain itself is EVM compatible, and then the kind of some of the cross-chain stuff that we're building as part of Cosmos will be if somebody else uses Polaris to launch their blockchain, we could have a way to build a permissionless cross-chain system that allows you to build a protocol like on both chains at the same time effectively. So you could have part of your, let's say you wanted to build a cross-chain lending market, right? You could have deposits on one chain and then borrows on another chain, something like that.
Thank you. Any other question for our speaker? Okay.
Really good overview. Thank you for that, Bear. Appreciate it.
No, thank you, Lim, for having me on, especially on such short notice. Really appreciate it.
I have a quick question. Dev Bear, I saw that you guys were recently expanding into Toronto. I know that we have like a bunch of Toronto-based folks here. So could you give us a bit of context to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So our main development office is in downtown Toronto. So the majority, I would say, half the team or so are Waterloo alum, and then a bunch from the US as well, like a couple people from Berkeley, but a lot of Waterloo and U of T people, which is super awesome. With the announcing the raise and everything, we have actually added a bunch more job postings and stuff. And I just sent this as a direct message, not to everybody in the chat. So I'll throw the link down here. If anyone, both across the business development side and then especially engineering as well, if anyone is looking for an L1 to join and lives in Toronto and likes working in person downtown, definitely either shoot me a message on Telegram or something, or I posted the link to our job board there. So all of our roles are in Toronto. So super. If anyone's interested in applying, definitely hit me up.
That's awesome. Good to see. We have and then a startup, based in Toronto. That's super exciting.
Victor, did you get host privileges back?
Yes, I
Okay.
did.
And were you able to let DK
Yeah.
back in?
Yeah,
Okay, awesome.
DK is back in, and he is the host now.
Amazing.
Okay, so before we move on to the third speaker, we're going to take a 5 minutes break. If you need to use washroom or get some water, so be it. And meanwhile, if anyone has any community announcement you'd like to share, now is your time. You just unmute yourself and just speak. Anyone want to?
Hey. Yeah, so I have a project that I'll just give a shout out to. It relates to network state and the social good, and it aims to enable the funding of communities and developments through the use of shared ledger technology or blockchain. So it applies generative economics to the actual, I suppose, process, which kind of values like the architecture of ownership. So the project has a white paper, there's a walkthrough. I've been accepted for an upcoming accelerator. So I'm looking for like some sort of like software engineer or developer that helps to build out the project and try and put it in a position where it can go for grants and fundings and such. So if you like network states, building out, something that kind of alternative, funding or financial funding, and you see any commonalities, reach out.
Great. Can you post a link on the chat, in the chat, so that people can find out more about your project?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other community announcement? No?
Anyone going to Consensus next week?
No?
Or ETH Global Waterloo coming up in June? Anyone hacking?
Oh, ETH Waterloo is coming up?
Yeah, it's coming up in June.
In June, wow.
Yeah.
That's much early than a few years ago before the pandemic. You and I went to the ETH Waterloo in October, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. It's a lot earlier this year. I think it was supposed to be the original ETH Global Toronto, but they decided to shift it to Waterloo. And it's where it all began. I think the first ever ETH Global event was in Waterloo in 2017. So it's going back to the roots now. Okay, so there's no more ETH Toronto? I think there is still a Futures Conference and ETH Toronto Hackathon, but it's not part of ETH Global. I see. Yep. Okay. Cool. I think we can get ready for the next speaker. Yeah. So awesome. So I can do the introduction for Deyeon. And Deyeon, can you just correct me if I'm wrong? Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
No, you pronounce it beautifully.
Deyeon. Okay, awesome. Awesome, thank you. Okay, so Deyeon Kim is the growth lead at Pods Finance. He's worked for TradFi firms and he's been an advisor at some of the largest banks like JP Morgan for 17 years. He switched over to the exciting world of DeFi just recently in January of 2023. So welcome to this amazing and sometimes chaotic world. His topic that he's going to be covering today is DAOs and the art of risk mitigation, the importance of hedging. He's going to talk about DAO treasury management, again, the importance of hedging and different ways to hedge for a down market. So with that said, welcome Deyeon, and thank you so much for being here. Up to you.
Thank you. You all can hear me and see the slides on your screen?
Yes, we can.
All right, perfect. Okay, so good morning, everybody. I am at ETH Taipei, so it is a little bit after 8 o'clock in the morning for me. I'm sure most of you, it is nighttime, so we're kind of on the opposite side of the planet there. Yeah, so as mentioned, my name is Deyeon Kim, and I am presenting to you, DAOs and the art of risk mitigation, the importance of hedging. And just a little bit of a background about me. Yes, I did spend 17 years in TradFi. I started out in institutional sales trading in the gold and silver markets, and I worked my way up to a private wealth advisor at JP Morgan. Spent about 17 years doing that. Now I'm at Pods Finance, which is a company that specializes in making easy to use institutional grade structured products and vaults for crypto and DeFi. And I bought Bitcoin actually back in 2013 for under $300 a token. My colleagues at JP Morgan, they all laughed at me saying that I threw my money away into something fake, but who's laughing now? Although I can't laugh too hard because I did sell most of my Bitcoin when it got to around 3,000. So shoulda, woulda, coulda, but that's kind of my story and my background there. So yes, in today's presentation, I want to briefly also describe DAOs and their treasury management challenges, the importance of hedging and different techniques that can be utilized, hypothetical scenarios, and some best practices. Okay. So what are DAOs? So DAO stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organizations. These are some of the biggest brands that you'll see. You probably recognize some of these logos. There are DAOs like BitDAO and Optimism with billions of dollars in their treasury. And then we have smaller DAOs that don't even have $1 million in their treasury, and then everything else in between. Weaker DAOs fail and new DAOs get created almost every day. I think I saw something recently that said DAO treasuries has now surpassed $26 billion for the first time. So it is a growing form of organization, but they are decentralized and autonomous, but are they necessarily organized? There are some good points that, people point out about the DAO structure. One of the things is that anybody can be involved in its governance. To be part of a DAO's governance, it's usually the case that one must own a crypto asset issued by the DAO, typically a governance token or an NFT. But since membership is usually dependent on ownership of such crypto assets, DAOs have the potential to have global reach in members. But this is also the source of a lot of their challenges. All right, so some of the challenges here is oftentimes, especially in the smaller DAOs, there's no designated, well-defined treasury team. If they do, it could be someone who volunteers or is perceived to be a trustworthy figure who may not have real financial management experience. Also, because of the decentralized nature, votes for key people in charge happen at certain time intervals, usually quarterly or every 6 months. And the focus and the objectives of the DAO can change as key people are voted off and a new team enters, which could create problems in planning treasury liquidity needs for multi-year goals. The DAO voting mechanism can make passing treasury initiatives excruciatingly slow and laborious. In most DAOs, actually, the process to make changes to the treasury starts with a discussion in their forum or on the Discord. And I actually put a picture of such thing, a Discord snapshot and a forum. Actually, this happened today. Literally, there's somebody saying, who do I vote for? Why is no one campaigning for my vote? What is this? Why haven't I seen people campaigning in big floats around my city? So, first of all, after you have these discussions on Discord, a quorum of interest must first be established, after which specific terms of the initiatives are debated amongst members. And once the wording and the specifics of a vote are finalized, then the vote can begin. And typically a minimum number of total votes needs to be cast for the initiative to pass. If not enough votes are cast, even if the majority of the votes cast are for the passing of the initiative, the whole process may have to start all over again. And some DAOs, especially those that are newer, certain whales may have larger concentration of votes. So, so much so that the DAO needs them to vote in order to reach the minimum vote threshold and to pass any initiative. This can be especially challenging if these whales refuse to vote or are they're AFK away from their keyboard and are non-responsive. Here are the financial challenges. So many DAOs have a large percentage of their treasury in their own native token or NFTs, and often these tokens and NFTs may not be liquid. As DAO members are holding these assets, there is a hesitancy on their part to vote in favor of the DAO treasury to sell these assets to raise additional funds. So some DAOs have provisions to allow for small amounts of their native tokens or NFTs held by the treasury to be sold at certain time intervals without a DAO vote. However, politics and optics will come into play here. Many DAO treasurers are afraid of the optics around selling these assets, as it may be interpreted by the market and other DAO members as a loss of faith in the ecosystem, or a signal that insiders believe these assets are now overvalued. And any accelerated price decline of these assets due to selling pressure jeopardizes their chances of renewing their mandates to keep their key roles. There's also price volatility at play here. We'll go further into this topic later in the presentation, but I mean, we all know crypto assets are extremely volatile, and many DAO native tokens or NFTs experience greater price fluctuations than ETH or Bitcoin. When ETH and Bitcoin go down, some of these governance tokens and NFT prices fall faster, and some even have gone even lower from the third quarter of 2022 when ETH and Bitcoin made its low and started their new rally. During extended periods of declining prices, such as in this recent bear market, this can put stresses on treasuries, especially if these DAOs have ongoing financial obligations like salaries, payments to contributors, or other long-term initiatives. Some DAOs revenues are also tied to the market. So as crypto asset prices have extended periods of decline, the usage of their ecosystem may drop, causing a drop in their revenue. And here are some real DAO examples. I wasn't going to put any DAOs on blast, but these are actual DAO treasury charts. You can look them up on deepdao.io. Just look at the top 100. I mean, most of them look like this. During the peak, they all peaked out. And then some of them have even lost 70, 80, 90% of their treasury value in this bear market. And some of them haven't even recovered. Some of them are still making new lows as time progresses, even though ETH and Bitcoin have made their lows in the third quarter. And some of them have all the down capture of the crypto market selling off. But then when it comes to the rallies, they're not capturing some of that upside. So that's one of the problems with some of these governance tokens. So these are actual real examples here. And then, through my work, in the last few months, talking to different DAOs, I've come up with some a hypothetical DAO treasury scenario. So, just to make the math easy, I had the start at $100 million in the treasury, and I took a look at the monthly performance of ETH from January 2022 going forward. That's the crypto winter, the bear market, if you will. And then here are some different scenarios. These are the runway in years. So every column that has 100 million that starts, that's a column of the monthly cash burn. So if you see on the 5-year, basically they're spending a little bit less. They're spending about 1.5% per month. And then all the way on the very right, you have the 1 year 8%. So this DAO is spending a lot more. They're spending 8% of their treasury every month. I would say this is a very, these 5 classes are kind of like the accurate viewpoint of the DAOs that we've been meeting with. On one hand, you have these DAOs that are very conservatively managed when it comes to their expenses, and they have 5 years, 4 or 5 years in their runway. And then you got the opposite side of the spectrum. You have those that have maybe 1 year. We had a couple of DAOs that said they had about 6 to 9 months left in their runway, and they were actively looking for ways to raise funds. So, you know, there's and everything in between. So this is what it looks like. And so in this, every line is the ETH performance and their monthly spending being taken out of their treasury. So this is what it looks like. So as you can see here, the one that had 1 year runway, you know, after about a year or so, a year and a quarter, they have only $15 million left. And just like in real world scenario, as their treasury dropped, their spending decreased as well. And so if they actually had real fixed spending where they did not cut their spending, you know, you would have to have 4 years of runway in order to survive this bear market. And so we actually saw a lot of DAOs fail in 2022. Those that survived with smaller runways, they survived because they started cutting costs drastically, all right? And so this takes a percentage of that previous months. So as the treasury drops, their also monthly spending is dropping, even though it's still 1.5%. It's just 1.5% of a smaller number, all right? So this brings to my next point, hedging, all right? And we're about to take a look at the benefits of hedging, but let's first define what hedging is. So hedging is taking on an offsetting position to protect against price risk in another position. So a hedge is very comparable to insurance. Let's say you own a home. You know, a lot of homeowners own flood insurance. So if you don't have a flood, you end up paying premium, and that, you know, that premium goes away. That insurance premium, that monthly premium you pay, you know, it just goes to the insurance company. But let's say you do have a flood, all right, then your insurance will pay you to recoup some of the value that you put into your home. So there is a risk reward trade-off in hedging. It reduces risk, but also reduces your potential rewards, especially in a prolonged bull market. The reduction in potential rewards is actually less pronounced in a choppy up and down market, what we in TradFi call the price discovery market. Usually in a price discovery market, hedging you know, doesn't really, you know, may not actually reduce your potential rewards. Actually, in some cases, it may actually increase it. But if we do have a prolonged bull market, yeah, your hedges are not going to pay off, and it will, you know, potentially reduce your long-term rate of return if we have that prolonged bull market. So how can we hedge? What are some of the techniques we can use? Very few DAOs actually have legal entities. We met a few that did, you know, and they may want to use a CME futures, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange futures on Ethereum and Bitcoin. For this, to have an account that is CME futures enabled, you do have to go through the KYC AML process. There needs to be a legal entity. And this is usually, though, favored by TradFi companies. If you look at most of the trading that's done on the ETH and Bitcoin CME futures, they're usually participants in other futures markets and other futures contracts at the CME as well. There's also perpetual futures. So this is usually now, you know, we're getting to like retail crypto traders, and some DAOs actually do participate in perp trading. You know, like CME futures, perp futures use leverage, all right? And this could potentially be a position that gets forced liquidated or extremely costly when hedging is not needed. So if we see crypto markets really run and really moon, then this could be an extremely expensive position to keep, and you know, your losses from this hedge could be great. You know, and with perpetual futures, you know, we say that the risk is undefined. You could potentially lose a lot more money, you know, than than what you originally expect. Now in crypto on chain, you get liquidated right at the levels, and so I guess your whole account balance would be the max if you're leveraging to the max. But yes, generally we call this an undefined risk. Now there's a third option that we can use, or a third choice I should say, and which is options derivatives. The challenge with options is that in order to get a payout, you have to be right in 3 aspects. You got to be right on the direction, you got to be right on the timing, and you got to be right on volatility. Now, here are the good points about options. Buying options is defined risk. You know exactly what your max loss is going to be when you buy those options. It's whatever the price you paid for them, okay? And this is for buying options, okay? When you sell options, when you sell naked options, yes, your risk can be potentially undefined, but we're only talking about buying options here. And when you buy options, your risks are defined. When you buy options too, it can be very capital efficient. You don't have to post, large margins. With CME futures, especially, your margins can be a little bit larger, but it is a capital efficient way because it also has a convex return profile, meaning that as you are correct, as you are proven right, as the market goes in your favor for this options trade, the more it goes in your favor, the more your profit potential accelerates. Okay, and I'll explain that in a little bit more detail with a picture. But the first thing I wanted to show also is the risk of futures trading. So this is a Friday to a Friday. This is the black lines, the 2 vertical black lines. That in between that is 1 week. All right. So in this example, let's say on a Friday, you say, you know what, by next Friday, ETH is going down. Okay, I feel this is toppy, it's coming down. You may be right that by next Friday we're down, but from Friday night to about Saturday or so, you notice that Ethereum goes up about 220 points, something like that. And depending on the leverage that you employ in your perpetual future, this may be a liquidation event. You may have a serious loss because of the next few hours up move. All right. But look, after a few days later, oh, we're actually down. We're actually below where you shorted initially. All right. So this is one of the challenges of perpetual futures, because you use all that leverage, your timing has to be impeccable and for you not to get liquidated out when you're using leverage. All right. Now with options, again, I told you about this convex payout nature. So the curved line is the profit profile, the return profile on a option that is bought. All right. So as you can see, the red line, a small little red line, that's the cost. You know what your costs are going to be. You know what your max cost will be. It's whatever the option cost. That's your max loss. And then your gains could exponentially go up. And as the market moves in your favor, that profit profile really starts accelerating. The flat line, the straight line that's pointed up, that is the profit profile, the return profile on a futures contract. And the steepness of that diagonal line is dependent on the leverage that you employ. So the more leverage you have, the more vertical it's going to be. The less leverage you have, the more horizontal that line could be. Okay, so this is where that efficiency comes in. You don't need to have a lot to make that large profit potential. You just need a big enough move. And with a small amount of capital deployed, you can still actually make more than what you did on the perpetual futures. Okay, so options, it's a great way to hedge for that tail end risk. All right, tail end risk. So we'll talk about that too. So this is an unhedged hypothetical treasury scenario. So this is what I just showed you a few slides before. Now I just color coded the April ending numbers for all these different scenarios. On the next slide, I have the benefits of hedging. So in this scenario, I take the same portfolios, but now I take 20% of the portfolio. And in this example, I put that 20% into Aave to make to get Aave yield. And I use the Aave yield to buy puts 1 week out that are out the money. Okay, this is something similar that we do here at Pods. Okay, it's a very, very similar thing that we're about to release pretty soon. So as you can notice here, and I also put the hypothetical hedging performance. As you can see, where we have really big drawdowns, May, June, and in November, when we had really fast, sharp declines, that's where these option strategies really paid out. And when you look at what happened during those times, those were those black swan events, when everybody was talking about systemic risk. I don't know if you guys remember May, June, that's when like AC3 and all those hedge funds, when they all failed and people were saying, ooh, who owes money to who, and Voyager and all of that, all they were shutting down. So that was that event. And then November, of course, was FTX. And so those were, those big events where we had really sharp declines, and we had that kind of tail end risk kind of movements in that market. So as you can see, if you deploy 20% of the treasury into hedging, the treasury with the 5-year runway is going to have $60 million by the time it's April 2023. That's the purple circle. Now, if we go back to the unhedged, it was around $45 million. Okay, so it's about a third more. And then, of course, the 4-year, 3-year, it's much higher. And let's look at the 1-year treasury. The treasury that had a 1-year runway, they have $36 million rather than $15 million. The red circle. This is the unhedged. That's $15 million that they have after a year when they're unhedged. But if they hedge, they would have more than double that amount. They would have more than $21 million in their treasury. Now imagine that opportunity cost. You did not hedge correctly. You did not manage risk correctly. So you are at less than half of what you could have been if you had hedged. That's pretty powerful. All right. And especially since no one can really predict when these things happen, it's not about, if a bear market will happen again, it's about when. So, especially if your runway is small, it makes sense to protect yourself, especially if you have so much exposure to the crypto space. And some of these treasuries, they have 70 to 80% of their treasury in their native token, which again has all the down capture of the crypto market, but may not have the up capture during a bull market. I also ran one for a 40% of the portfolio. If a treasury were to use 40% of their portfolio for options hedging strategy, same strategy, you take 40% of the portfolio, put it into Aave, get the Aave yield and buy puts on a weekly basis with the weekly yield that gets paid out. Some of you may be thinking to yourself, well, 40% is a lot of money to be hedging for a portfolio. It's actually not. In traditional wealth management, we call a balanced portfolio a 60-40 portfolio, 60% in risk assets like in equities and in stocks, and 40% in government treasuries, cash equivalent, short-term paper. So it's actually quite common to have these 60-40 type portfolios amongst professional financial in professional financial management. So let's say a treasury were to put 40% during this downturn. As you can see, the treasury with the 5-year run rate, which is the purple, all right, it would have $75 million, but in the unhedged, 44. So again, almost double, not quite double, like 70 to 80% more is in their treasury if they put 40% of their portfolio in this hedging strategy. Now let's look at the other side of the spectrum, the treasury that only has 1-year runway. They have $57 million. That's more than 3 times more, almost 4 times more than what they would have had if they didn't hedge. So that is a huge opportunity cost. I mean, that's the difference between, are you going to survive the next year or two, or, are you going to be barely making it, or are you going to be able to fund all your initiatives and grow with all the goals that you had in mind as a treasury? So that's a huge difference. So, the key takeaway here is this: hedging is beneficial in preserving the value of a portfolio or treasury, and especially if you have less of a runway. All right. And one of the things that I really want to point out is, like, when you take these losses, look at the unhedged here. From January to April, we had this bull market, right? 32% gain in January, 1.2 in February, 13.5 in March, 15. Look at the 1 year. They've lost so much money that, I mean, they don't have that much of a meaningful rise in their treasury, even though there was this mini bull market for the last 4 months. Okay. And it's like what Warren Buffett says. Warren Buffett says, there's 2 rules to money management. Rule number 1, never lose money. Rule number 2, always remember rule number 1. And it just comes from straight up math. If you lose 10%, you need to make 11% to break even. If you lose 50%, you have to double to break even. If you lose 75%, you need to quadruple your portfolio to break even. Every time you take these large losses, you're digging yourself into a hole. And the deeper you dig, the more time and resources it takes for you to dig yourself out of that hole. So the point here is you want to keep your losses small. You don't want these huge, like, devastating losses. You want to try to minimize the impact of those losses so you can recoup fairly quickly and start making new money again. So that's one of the big takeaways here. And also too, options provide a great choice in providing that hedging return profile. It has that convexity of returns, and it has that defined risk. So you know exactly what you're on the hook for if your hedge doesn't pay out. All right. Any questions, comments, perhaps rude remarks? I know I had a lot of those spreadsheets on my presentation, and you're more than invited to give me your feedback. Perhaps those spreadsheets were a little bit too much to put on a slideshow. I get it, but you can always connect with me on social media. That's my Linktree QR code, and you can also reach me on Twitter and Telegram as well.
Thank you so much. Any question for our speaker? Great.
Yeah, sorry, I guess, yeah, maybe just one quick question for Deyeon. Sorry if I missed this, but like what other DAO treasuries are you currently working with and kind of deployed this kind of hedging strategy, and how's the performance been over the last 6 months?
Well, actually, so we've talked to several, right now, if you go to pods.finance, we have a volatility vault that's open right now. There's only one vault that is live at the moment. So that in that one, we take ETH, we stake it in Lido, we take half the yield, and we buy calls and puts, so bearish bets and bullish bets. So right now, that's the only vault that is live. We're about to release 2 new vaults, okay? And one of them is going to be the hedging vault. We're going to name it FUD. That's fear. It stands for fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It's going to be called our FUD vault, and that is a vault where you can put your USDC in there. We're going to get Aave yield and then buy puts with 100% of that Aave yield to remain principal protected. So that is our FUD vault. We only use the yield from Aave to buy those puts. And also same thing with our volatility vault. We only use the yield to buy those options. We got a third vault that we're coming out. It's going to be called Euphoria. And that one is actually going to be you take your ETH, you get Lido yield out of it, and then we're going to take that yield and buy all call options with that yield. So we're going to have 3 vaults soon where all 3 are going to be principal protected because we're only using the yield to buy options, and they're going to have different risk profiles based on what you believe the market will do. These other 2, the FUD vault and the Euphoria vault, were developed through our conversations with the DAOs that we had. Most of the DAOs we talked to said that there's no good way for us to hedge or get extra yield in a down market. That was one set of DAOs. Another set of DAOs told us, well, we've got a large runway. We've got 5-6 years in our runway. We'd rather capture as much upside as possible if there is a bull market. And that's what Euphoria, it's a play on words for euphoria. That's what those 2 vaults are for. So those 2 haven't even been launched yet. We're going to launch them very soon. We're already doing internal testing on them. So it should be any day now that we launch that. So I guess stay tuned, and you'll see it launch with us as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Deyeon.
Yeah.
Any other question?
Hi. I have a question for Nail. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Yes. Hi, Nail. Just listening. My name is Scott, and yeah, I did like your your presentation with the graphs and everything and explaining everything, and just talking about your background history in financials. So listening to what I know of crypto and DAOs are votes within the crypto ecosystem and such, right? And based on my understanding, is it that you are taking crypto itself from the different blockchains, or is it specific like DAO voting shares of a blockchain, and then doing like risk leveragement? And it's kind of like, as you described, almost like a pro shorts type of ETF thing to kind of like leverage based on like puts or call options on the direction of crypto, right? So I'm not sure if I totally understood it, but that was my take. Is that correct?
Are you speaking to me, or are you speaking to the gentleman named Niall?
Oh, sorry. Deyeon, sorry.
Yeah, I think you got the name mixed up there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mixed up the names. I apologize. Deyeon, yeah. Sorry, I was looking at Niall's name in front of me when I was talking, and yeah, sorry, I mixed up.
So your question was on the voting process. How is that related to the options?
Yeah, so my understanding of a DAO is crypto votes, right? So it's kind of like a voting share to have a say so in the direction of the blockchain ecosystem community, right?
Right.
So is that specifically what you're leveraging as an asset, or are you actually are you leveraging like Ethereum or like Bitcoin, or like actual more higher prized assets in a type of CBD contract or something, and then to do like a type of like ETF per se? Like I'm just using the terminology ETF because that's, in my mind, it kind of fits into that, to basically say you're putting call or options, like you think something's going to go up, something's going down, because the market's highly volatile. It goes in different directions all the time, right? So
yeah, so the DAOs are just organizations. They're just organizations made up of people who own a certain token or an NFT. A lot of times they're, as I said, the DAOs are mostly in their own native token, and the optics are really bad for selling their native token. It's almost impossible to get like a quorum to sell unless it's like really desperate measures. I've only seen very few measures passed to sell the native token to raise additional funds. So usually what happens is most DAOs will have about 60 to 80% of their treasury in their native token, and then everything else will be in like ETH, stable coins. Every once in a while you'll find one that owns Bitcoin or something like that. But yeah, what you can do is leverage not leverage, but you could use your ETH and stake it in something called, something like Lido, and get that yield and buy options with that yield, which is what Pods does in some of their vaults. Or you could use a stable coin to generate yield and then buy options with that yield. It's just these options are just tools to help in hedging. It's just one of the techniques you can use in hedging. And I laid out, some of the benefits of using options rather than some of the other techniques that are out there. Again, it's very cost effective. It's defined risk. There is this convexity to the return profile. So, I mean, really anybody can use these tactics. I mean, these are strategies that are used in traditional finance all the time, on the S&P 500, on different stocks, on the NASDAQ, on this and that. But, right now there's more and more interest in Ethereum and Bitcoin options. I mean, you can take a look at the open interest on Deribit or some of the other exchanges or market makers. And we're seeing year over year, we're seeing the open interest or the amount of contracts that are being traded out there increasing. Just a few weeks ago, we had $10 billion open interest on Bitcoin options on Deribit and almost $6 billion, $7 billion in Ethereum open interest. So it is a growing market. It is something that a lot of professional money managers are looking toward to hedge their crypto exposure. And I think it's here to stay, and it's going to keep going up.
Yeah, no, I see already exchanges having option tradings already, and they actually incentivize it and encourage it to say, like, if you trade over $5,000 in a week, you'll get bonuses and stuff, right? Like, so like they incentivize option trading. But like, so what you're talking about, Deyeon, is that, is it like Lido? Is this like an application, or is this like
yeah, Lido is just it's a staking validator. And so, I guess the most important thing, if you've never heard of Lido before, is just, you can, as a Ethereum, let's say you're an Ethereum holder, you can go and Lido will stake your ETH and you will get a staking yield for that. So it's the biggest, one of the biggest validators out there. It's battle tested. It's been around the longest. It's one of the most trusted names in DeFi. And right now, I think they're paying about, I want to say like 3.7. Don't quote me on that, but it fluctuates based on how many validators there are and other market forces. But yes, that's a way for ETH holders to generate yield. Well, now after the Chapella upgrade, actually, there's you can also now validate at home as well too. But if you don't want to do it yourself, you can always go through a company like Lido or something like that.
With Lido, is that like AI trading?
No, it's not AI trading. It's just validating the node. So when you validate, node validators get rewarded for validating transactions on the Ethereum network. That's how the mechanism in the Ethereum network works. And there is a payment for that. And so what Lido does is they aggregate everybody's yield that, you know, all the people that stake on Lido, they take all that ETH and they use that, they stake it, and they get rewards, and most of the rewards, they pass it on to those who stake through them, and they just take a small cut of it.
Yeah,
That's
so
how-
in that sense,
guys, sorry,
sounded exactly like an ETF, right? So
Hey guys, sorry, I'm just gonna
Okay,
thank
stop
you.
right there. I don't want to monopolize all of Deyeon's time. There's a lot of fundamental questions that you can probably get answered with just a quick Google search. But Victor, back to you. I know there's probably a few other people that had some questions, so maybe Victor, if you wanted to open up to those people, and then we can wrap it up.
Okay, I saw one hands up, Boyd, is that correct? Uda, what's your question?
Oh, yes, I just wanted to find out about options. Where do you normally trade on centralized exchanges or decentralized exchanges? And is it mostly on Bitcoin and Ethereum, where you get a lot of volume and open interest?
Yes, for right now, the market, it appears as if most of the open interest is on Bitcoin and Ethereum. Us at Pods, we actually use 5 different exchanges / market makers. Some of our market makers are on chain. The reason why we use 5 different ones is because of execution. We want the best prices. So all of our market makers know that they're competing for our business. And so we buy a new round of options every week. And so we have a relationship with them. And for the best execution, we try to get the best bids and asks for our options.
And how long do you hold those options? Is that weekly, monthly?
Generally, we do it just a weekly option that expires in a week. So we buy an option on Friday, and then the round, or what we call the epoch, closes on the next Friday. And so it usually that the option will expire on that Friday. It's only a week long, so it either expires in the money and we get an extra yield, or it's out the money and just goes worthless, and we just lose out on, you know, the Aave yield or the Lido yield for that week. And that's the strategy so far.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, it's now 1 minute after 9. We just come to end our today's session, and Deyeon, one of our attendee, Michael Arif, is asking how to connect with you. So maybe you want to, put a, email or Twitter account or something, so that people want to reach out to you can reach out to you.
Yeah, I'm not sure if anybody, I'm not sure if I'm sharing my screen still or not, but my QR code is still up there. You can scan my QR code. My Linktree link is right there. My Twitter handle, my Telegram handle is all on there.
Sorry, because I reclaimed my host role, so that your slide is no longer on the screen.
Okay, sure. I'll type it in real quick right now.
Yeah,
Linktree. There you go. That's the link. And if you just copy and paste that into your web browser, it will go to every one of my social media outlets. My email is on there. Pods Finance homepage is on there, where you can you can try out the vaults. Also, too, we have a side project called DeFi Returns, where we look at actual returns from different DeFi protocols. That's a little side project of ours at Pods. You're more than welcome to check all that out too. It's all on there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, we come to our end, and our next month, we're going to host another online meetup on May 25th, Thursday. So hope you all can come back and join us, and we will have some interesting, latest project in the DeFi space to share with you. Okay, Alim, any last thoughts?
No, I just wanted to thank the speakers again, and I'm not sure who's left, but Deyeon, thank you so much for that presentation and the Q&A. And thanks to all the other speakers as well. We'll see you next month.
Indeed. And good night and see you next month. Thank you.